the world's most powerful telescopes have turned their gaze away from the Sun. Officially, the reason is safety. The Sun, they say, is too bright, too volatile to observe directly. But some suspect that this convenient excuse hides something more, something that those telescopes have already seen and do not wish to reveal. From a modest backyard in Brazil, amateur astronomer Tiago, known online as Dobsonian Power, did what the institutions refused to do. He aimed his telescope straight into the glare. The risk was immense. Sunlight could scorch the delicate optics in seconds. But Tiago was driven by something stronger than fear, curiosity, and what he captured may change how humanity sees itself in the universe. His video feed flickered with static as his equipment fought the brightness. For minutes, there was nothing but a wash of white. Then, faintly, something emerged, a dark geometric shadow cutting against the light. The frame froze. Tiago leaned closer. It wasn't a flare, nor a filament, nor any known solar feature. It was triangular. At first, he dismissed it as an artifact, but others saw it too. Viewers in his livestream chat flooded the screen with disbelief. A few even captured screenshots. One viewer, Chris Green, took it further. Using his own telescope in Texas, he replicated the experiment, and his images were far clearer. A triangle, sharp-edged and black as ink, hovering near the rim of the Sun. NASA said nothing. The community, however, erupted. To them, this was no mere comet or reflection. This was technology, an engineered object operating in a region where no spacecraft could survive. The official name for the nearby celestial body was 3I Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar visitor to our solar system. But among the growing network of amateur astronomers, it had acquired another name, the Watcher. The theory spread quickly. What if 3I Atlas wasn't a comet at all? What if it was a mothership, an interstellar vessel that had journeyed across light years to reach our Sun? And the triangular shadow was one of its smaller probes, refueling in the star's radiance before continuing its voyage. It sounds impossible, and yet, as the evidence multiplied, disbelief began to fray. Tiago replayed the footage again and again. He analysed the frames pixel by pixel. The triangle's angles were too perfect, its motion too deliberate. It seemed to shimmer slightly, as if adjusting its orientation, and then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. In the days that followed, more anomalies appeared. Amateur astronomers across the world reported geometric shadows near the solar surface, triangles, circles, even complex hexagonal patterns. Some dismissed them as imaging artifacts. Others whispered that something was feeding on the Sun. NASA's response was silence. When Tiago contacted their public outreach division, he received an automated reply citing limited observation windows due to ongoing data processing delays. The timing was uncanny. A US government shutdown had temporarily halted many NASA operations, including data releases from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. Conveniently, this was the same week 3I Atlas was at its most visible. To the community, this wasn't coincidence. It was concealment. For decades, whispers have surrounded NASA's solar monitoring missions, claims that spacecraft like SOHO and Stereo regularly capture unidentified objects near the Sun, only for those images to vanish from public archives. Skeptics call it paranoia. Believers call it pattern recognition. But 3I Atlas reignited the question, what exactly are we not supposed to see? Tiago's next livestream drew tens of thousands of viewers. His camera trembled as he aligned his telescope. Sweat glistened on his face. He narrated softly, his voice half awe, half fear. "If this is what I think it is," he said, "then it's been here longer than we've known." The chat scrolled in a blur of speculation. Some begged him to stop, afraid of blinding his equipment. Others urged him on. "Show us," one wrote, "what NASA won't." When the image resolved, a murmur swept through the stream. The triangular shape had returned. Darker, larger, closer. This time it seemed to shimmer with faint motion, like heat ripples bending light. Tiago whispered, "It's moving." That night his video went viral. Major media outlets ignored it. But on Reddit, Twitter, and obscure Discord servers, the footage became legend. Theories splintered and multiplied. Some claimed the object was a solar energy harvester. Others said it was an interstellar beacon. gathering data from the sun's magnetic field. A few proposed something even stranger, that the sun itself was artificial, and these objects were maintenance drones. Tiago didn't speculate, he simply kept looking. His growing following dubbed him the last real astronomer. Each night, thousands tuned in to watch him point his telescope toward the forbidden light. They waited, breath held for another glimpse of the impossible. Chris Green's latest image pushed the debate to its breaking point. The triangle's edges were so sharp that image compression artifacts couldn't explain them. Its symmetry was mathematical. Even the shadows along its base were consistent with an external light source, the sun itself. In his next stream, Tiago admitted defeat. "Chris," he said quietly, "you won." He announced plans to acquire a Herschel wedge, the same optical setup Chris had used, to replicate the results under identical conditions. The community erupted with excitement. They had 5 days left before solar conjunction, the period when the sun's glare would hide Three-Eye Atlas completely. After that, observation would be impossible for months. Whatever this was, it was their last chance to prove it. In those 5 days, Tiago's backyard became a digital observatory watched by the world. His camera feed was shared, mirrored, and restreamed by enthusiasts across continents. Engineers offered advice. Physicists joined the chat. Even a few ex-NASA employees appeared anonymously, hinting that Tiago might be closer to the truth than he realized. Behind the public fascination, a quieter fear spread. If this was truly an alien vessel, why was it here? Why now? The numbers were staggering. At its closest approach, Three-Eye Atlas passed within 15 million kilometers of the Sun, closer than Mercury's orbit. Temperatures there exceed 1,000 degrees, radiation levels beyond comprehension. No human-made craft could survive such proximity. And yet the mysterious triangle hovered calmly, unbothered by the inferno. Tiago's viewers began referring to it as the Sun Diver. Some said it was studying us. Others believed it was feeding, absorbing energy, perhaps converting sunlight into propulsion. A few wondered if it had been here before, hidden each time behind the glare during solar conjunctions. As the days dwindled, the tone of Tiago's streams shifted. They became quieter, almost reverent. He spoke less, letting the hum of his equipment and the whisper of the wind carry the atmosphere. His followers said it felt like watching the end of an era, the moment humanity's ignorance began to crumble. On the final night before conjunction, Tiago pointed his telescope toward the coordinates one last time. The triangle was there, fainter now, as if slipping away. He watched in silence, recording until the disk of the sun swallowed it completely. Then, nothing. He sat back, tears in his eyes. "It's gone," he murmured. "For now." Across the internet, people stared at their screens, united by wonder and uncertainty. Was it a probe? A comet? A trick of light? No one could say for sure, but one truth remained undeniable. Something had been there, and whatever it was, it had come from beyond the stars. As the sun blazed on in indifferent silence, humanity waited. Behind that curtain of light, Three-Eye Atlas was hiding its secrets, and soon it would return. The blind spot. When the sun swallowed Three-Eye Atlas, the world lost sight of it, not just visually, but scientifically. The phenomenon known as solar conjunction had begun. For weeks, maybe months, the object would be unreachable, hidden behind the solar glare that even the best telescopes couldn't pierce. Officially, astronomers called this a normal observational blackout. But within the growing circle of independent watchers, it was something far more ominous. The blind spot had become a symbol of secrecy, of suppression, of the moment when truth hides in plain light. Tiago felt the silence like a physical weight. His streams, once electric with discovery, now lingered in uncertainty. The triangle was gone, and so were the whispers of proof. His chat was filled with speculation. Some said the probe had completed its mission. Others claimed it was still there, camouflaged by the light. A few, the most hopeful, believed it had entered the sun itself. NASA maintained its polite indifference. There were no statements, no follow-ups, no images from SOHO or stereo showing the object's fate. Even requests under the Freedom of Information Act yielded nothing but bureaucratic walls. Data not available during conjunction period, every document said. The phrase repeated like a mantra of denial. But Tiago couldn't let it go. He replayed the final frames over and over, searching for subtle shifts, anything that might hint at the triangle's departure trajectory. In the last few seconds before it vanished, there was a flicker, barely perceptible, a shimmer like a heat mirage bending space. He slowed it down frame by frame until he saw what looked like a pulse of light, a brief flare that seemed to echo outward. Was it an engine burst, a reflection, or the last moment of a dying camera sensor? In Texas, Chris Green wasn't sleeping either. He had become a reluctant celebrity in the community, the man who caught the impossible. Reporters emailed him, skeptics hounded him, and conspiracy theorists praised him like a prophet. But Chris wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing understanding. He built a new setup, dual telescopes, multiple filters, and a custom cooling system for his camera. When the object re-emerged, he wanted to be ready. Meanwhile, the fringe network of skywatchers grew into a global organism. Dozens of amateurs from Spain, Japan, Argentina, and South Africa synchronized their efforts, sharing coordinates, timing, and calibration data in real time. What began as curiosity had evolved into a decentralized observatory, a collective eye waiting for the moment 3i Atlas stepped out from behind the sun. During the blackout, speculation reached fever pitch. Some believed the object had released smaller drones before vanishing. Others said it had burrowed into the solar corona, harvesting energy or data from within the magnetic field. A viral theory claimed that fluctuations in the sun's radio emissions were encoded messages, patterns too regular to be natural. Experts dismissed it as coincidence, but the rhythm of the pulses haunted forums. It was as if the sun itself was whispering. Tiago didn't dismiss it outright. Late one night, during a quiet livestream, he played back recordings of the solar radio data. Bursts of static hums, rhythmic beats. The waveform patterns on screen formed a strange symmetry. He adjusted the playback speed and tone, converting the frequencies into the audible range. What came through was eerie, a low, droning sound, rising and falling in intervals that almost felt deliberate. The chat fell silent. Then someone typed, "It's breathing." Tiago smiled faintly, uneasy. "No," he said, "it's not breathing. But something's alive in there." Days turned into weeks. News outlets moved on. The world forgot. Only a few thousand still checked Tiago's nightly streams, watching a sun that revealed nothing. But beneath that silence, data was accumulating. The ESA's solar orbiter recorded subtle magnetic distortions near the region where 3i Atlas had disappeared. The readings were small, barely above noise, but consistent, like a ripple persisting long after the stone had sunk. NASA's internal logs, later leaked to a private forum, mentioned an unidentified transient signal observed by the Parker Solar Probe around the same time. The signal lasted just under 12 seconds, an anomaly dismissed publicly as sensor interference, yet privately tagged as requires follow-up. For Tiago and Chris, this was confirmation. The object wasn't gone. It had done something while behind the sun, something that left fingerprints on the magnetic field, something powerful enough to ripple across millions of kilometers of plasma. And then, months later, a whisper. Atlas had reappeared. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. Observatory logs picked up its trajectory emerging from the far side of the sun, precisely where calculations predicted, except for one thing. The path was off by a few degrees, just enough to suggest that something had changed its course. Natural objects don't do that. When the alert reached Tiago, he went live within minutes. His voice trembled as he spoke. "It's back," he said, "and it's not where it should be." The chat erupted. Across continents, telescopes turned skyward. Chris activated his new system. Data poured in, photometry, tracking, radio signals. Every observer, every camera, every mind focused on a single question. What had 3i Atlas become while hidden behind the sun? For now, the light still kept its secrets. But one thing was certain. The object had changed, and it was coming closer. The return signal. By the time 3i Atlas emerged from behind the sun, it was no longer just a comet. It had become a myth, a story whispered across digital forums and night sky communities, a riddle suspended between science and faith. When its faint light finally appeared in telescopes once more, The world that had stopped watching looked away again. But the ones who never stopped, the amateurs, the insomniacs, the dreamers, were waiting. Tiago's live stream that night began with silence. No intro music, no banter, only the sound of wind brushing against the microphone. He had upgraded everything: his filters, his mount, his cooling systems. The new Herschel wedge sat polished in the mount like a promise. He spoke quietly, as if addressing the dark. "It's been 106 days, he said, and it's finally back." The chat filled with anticipation. Across the world, hundreds of telescopes aligned to the same coordinates. The sun was gone from view now, far to the east. 3i Atlas had moved into the night sky, faint but measurable. Tiago's software tracked its predicted path, a pale streak of interstellar debris moving just a little too deliberately. The first image came through blurry. He adjusted exposure and focus, and then it appeared, a dim, flickering point with a strange asymmetry, as though light was leaking from one side. He froze the frame. The audience watched in awe. It looked like a comet, except its coma, the glowing halo of gas around it, pulsed. Every few seconds, the brightness surged and receded. The rhythm was steady, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. At the same time, Chris Green in Texas reported something stranger. His telescope, fitted with polarizing filters to analyze reflected light, detected alternating polarization, light shifting between orientations as if bouncing off panels or facets. "Natural comets don't do this," Chris said during a joint call with Tiago. "The reflection's structured. It's not random." When they overlaid their data, the pattern deepened. Both brightness and polarization cycled together, like synchronized signals. Within hours, an independent group in Poland confirmed the same periodicity. Once every 78 seconds, the light from 3i Atlas pulsed in intensity and angle. Someone in the chat typed, "It's transmitting." The comments spiraled into obsession. Forums exploded with analysis. Some decoded the intervals as binary, others as prime number sequences. Most were nonsense. But buried in the noise, a few scientists quietly admitted that the periodic light variation was real. It wasn't an illusion. The question was why. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory released a short statement 2 days later. 3i Atlas exhibits periodic fluctuations consistent with rotational variation. In plain words, they were calling it spin. But Tiago wasn't convinced. He compared the pulse intervals to known rotational light curves of comets, and the numbers didn't fit. The object wasn't rotating fast enough to produce that frequency. Something else was causing the rhythm. He looked again at the brightness graph on his screen. A wave of light, smooth and perfect, like a signal too precise for chance. "It's artificial," he whispered. "It has to be." Over the following nights, more telescopes joined the watch. The community organised shifts across time zones to ensure continuous observation. Data flowed in from Argentina, Iceland, Japan and the Canary Islands. Each observer recorded the same pattern, the same heartbeat in the dark. Then came the anomaly. On the 7th night after reappearance, Tiago noticed a second pulse, fainter and offset by a few seconds. When he compared notes with Chris, the offset appeared in his data too. "It's like a reply," Chris said, "or an echo." The pulse intervals began to shift subtly, no longer perfect but modulated. Something was changing. The amplitude grew weaker, the rhythm stretched, as if whatever was producing it was losing stability. A new theory emerged. The object wasn't just transmitting, it was communicating with something else. Radio astronomers in South Africa picked up faint bursts in the microwave band at the same 78-second frequency. The signals were weak, barely above background noise but synchronized with the optical pulses. For a brief moment there was convergence between the professionals and the amateurs. The data matched. The signal was real. And then, silence. The pulses stopped. For 3 nights, nothing. No rhythm, no fluctuation, only the cold glint of a starless fragment drifting through the dark. Some thought it had powered down. Others said it had finished its message. Tiago's stream that week felt like a funeral. He sat in the dim red glow of his observatory, eyes fixed on the motionless point of light. "It's quiet now," he said softly, like it went to sleep. Chris disagreed. "It's not sleeping," he said during a private call. "It's charging." He showed Tiago his latest data, a subtle rise in infrared brightness, a thermal bloom spreading across the object's surface. Whatever it was heating up again. The implications were chilling. If 3i Atlas was truly artificial, if it was harnessing energy or preparing to move, then it wasn't just a visitor anymore. It was awake. NASA's silence deepened. The official channels stopped responding altogether. A leaked memo surfaced weeks later from an internal Slack conversation among solar mission engineers. The line that caught everyone's attention was simple. If this data holds, it's not gravitational. Tiago read that line on stream, his voice trembling. Not gravitational, he repeated. That means propulsion. The triangle had moved on from the sun. Now it was crossing the void with intent. And if the pulses were indeed messages, then perhaps Earth wasn't the only one listening. The fracture in the sky. As the pulse patterns faded into silence, the global network of watchers splintered. Some believed the object had gone dormant. Others were certain it had changed states, transitioned into something new. The debate grew vicious, dividing communities that had once worked in unison. Tiago tried to hold it together. He wanted to keep things rational, grounded in observation, but the silence from NASA and the strange thermal readings from Chris's instruments were like gasoline on a fire. By mid-February, the data began to shift again. Observatories in Chile and Australia reported an odd reflection pattern. 3i Atlas's light signature was no longer consistent with a tumbling rock. Instead, it exhibited phase-locked brightness, meaning one side was reflecting sunlight more than the other, as though it was maintaining orientation. The term for this, in spacecraft dynamics, was attitude control. A natural object cannot do that. Chris's infrared data confirmed what the professionals were whispering off record. The heat wasn't random. It moved across the object's surface in a deliberate wave, like a sequence of panels warming one after another. It looked like activation. Tiago's streams took on a more somber tone. He no longer spoke with excitement. He spoke with conviction. "It's not a comet," he told his audience one night. "It's a machine." His words lingered in the quiet hum of electronics. "And it's waking up." Within days, independent radio observatories began picking up new anomalies, short microwave bursts repeating irregularly, clustered around frequencies used in deep space communication. No known spacecraft were transmitting from that direction. When plotted over time, the bursts formed patterns that resembled Doppler shifts, as if two sources were moving relative to each other, exchanging signals. It was Chris who noticed the symmetry. "These are echoes," he said, overlaying the data streams. "Whatever 3i Atlas is talking to, it's not us. It's something else out there." The idea of multiple objects triggered a wave of panic in online circles. Some users claimed to see dim reflections following the same trajectory. A few even shared images, faint points of light trailing behind, each pulsing faintly in synchronization. The mainstream dismissed it as coincidence, but the amateur network called it a convoy. Tiago hesitated before endorsing the theory. He didn't want hysteria. But the evidence kept building. Spectroscopic analysis from Poland showed spectral line distortions consistent with secondary reflections, small objects near the primary one. When plotted in 3D, the configuration resembled a formation, not debris. 5 smaller bodies orbiting the main one in a loose hexagonal pattern. He stared at the simulation in disbelief. That's not random," he whispered. By March, the story had escaped the confines of fringe forums. A leaked email from a European Space Agency analyst mentioned possible multi-body coordination in 3i Atlas data and unresolved mechanical signatures. Within hours, the message spread across social media. Hashtags like Atlas Fleet and Dastia solar probes trended globally. NASA, predictably, said nothing. Then came the fracture. On the night of March 11th, Tiago went live to stream a new observation. His telescope, now modified with dual cameras, tracked the object with unprecedented stability. The feed was quiet at first, a faint point against the blackness. Then suddenly it split. Viewers gasped. The point of light divided into 2, then 3, then 5 smaller fragments. But these weren't shards drifting apart. They moved with intent, accelerating, realigning, forming a pattern like the petals of a geometric flower. The chat exploded. "It's deploying," someone wrote. Another typed, "That's a fleet." Tiago's voice trembled. "No," he said softly. "That's structure." Chris, watching from his own feed, confirmed the separation. His telemetry showed synchronized motion, each fragment changing velocity by the same rate, as though commanded by a shared control system. "They're communicating," he said. "They're linked." Within hours, independent radar arrays picked up transient echoes, consistent with multiple small bodies reflecting radio waves. The measurements were brief, but consistent. 5 distinct signatures, all moving as one. Mainstream observatories scrambled to verify, but official channels remained silent. Tiago didn't sleep that night. He replayed the footage over and over. The shapes were small, faint, almost ethereal, but real. His viewers called them the Sentinels. The next morning he received an email from an anonymous address. It contained a single attachment, a short audio file of faint rhythmic static. The subject line read, "You were right, it's active." He played it live. The waveform pulsed in sync with the same 78-second rhythm that had once defined 3i Atlas. Only now it was modulated, faster, fragmented, like code being compressed and transmitted across unimaginable distances. "Someone's sending something," Tiago said, staring at the spectrogram. The signal repeated 3 times, then cut off abruptly. Across the world, data centers monitoring radio noise near the sun detected something similar. A pattern of bursts sweeping across multiple frequencies, fading toward the outer solar system. It was as if 3i Atlas had turned outward, away from the sun, away from us, and sent a message home. Tiago leaned into his microphone. "It's not here to stay," he said quietly. "It came to say something, and now it's leaving." His words echoed through the darkness of his small observatory. Behind him, the telescope whirred softly, still tracking the vanishing lights. In that moment, every viewer watching understood the same thing. The triangle, the pulses, the fragments, they were never meant for us. The stars had just spoken to one another, and Earth had overheard the first whisper. The message beneath the noise. The audio file haunted Tiago. It wasn't just the sound itself, the rhythmic bursts of static, the sense of intention behind the noise. It was the fact that it shouldn't exist at all. He had spent years listening to the universe's silence, the background hiss of radiation that fills every frequency. This was different, structured, pulsed, measured. It was a whisper carved into chaos. For the first time, Tiago reached out to professionals. He sent the file to a handful of astronomers and signal analysts, carefully omitting where it came from. Most ignored him. A few responded politely. But one, an anonymous researcher from Europe, replied with a question that sent chills down Tiago's spine. "Did you capture this before or after the split?" He typed back, "After." The reply came an hour later. "Then it's not from 3i Atlas, it's from the 5th object." That line spread through the community like wildfire. The 5 fragments, the Sentinels, had become an obsession. Each seemed to behave differently. One maintained a steady brightness, another flickered irregularly, and the 5th, the faintest, had begun drifting in an erratic path, as if it had broken formation. It was this rogue fragment, according to the anonymous source, that was transmitting. Chris set up a dedicated tracking system, synchronizing multiple telescopes across 3 states to follow the 5th fragment's trajectory. The results were unsettling. Its path wasn't ballistic. It curved subtly but undeniably, as if responding to invisible forces or steering itself through micro-adjustments. When plotted over time, its movement traced a spiral, a slow, deliberate pattern that ended not in deep space, but in the direction of Earth. Tiago didn't want to believe it. "That's impossible," he said on stream. "Even if it's moving intelligently, it would take months to reach us." Chris shook his head. "Not if it's signaling. The path might not be physical. It could be targeting." Targeting. The word hung in the air like static. For the next week, the 5th fragment became the world's most mysterious object. Radio telescopes in Australia and South Africa confirmed bursts at nearly identical intervals to the original signal. But now the pulse pattern was changing. It was speeding up, and with every new burst the spectrum widened, spanning multiple bands of frequency. When converted to sound, it wasn't static anymore. It was melody. Low, resonant tones rising and falling like a code sung across the void. An independent mathematician from Sweden discovered something unnerving. The intervals between pulses followed a Fibonacci sequence, each burst separated by a time equal to the sum of the two before it. It wasn't random. It was mathematical elegance, a universal signature of order. The media finally caught up. Headlines appeared in fringe outlets first. Interstellar object sends mathematical signal toward Earth. Then mainstream networks picked it up, though more cautiously. Unexplained rhythmic radio source detected. NASA issued a terse denial. No evidence of artificial transmission has been confirmed. But no one was listening anymore. The story had escaped containment. Tiago stopped streaming publicly. The attention had become suffocating. Conspiracy channels twisted his footage into wild theories about alien warnings and government cover-ups. His inbox overflowed with threats and praise alike. Through it all, he stayed in touch with Chris, who continued to monitor the fifth object. The data kept coming, but now it carried something new. Hidden within the bursts, between the harmonic peaks, were modulations too structured to be noise. The European researcher decrypted a fragment and sent Tiago a spectral plot. At first it looked meaningless, just waveforms stacked across frequencies. But when the data was converted into visual form, something emerged. A geometric pattern, unmistakable and deliberate. A triangle, encircled by 6 smaller dots. Tiago stared at it in disbelief. It mirrored the formation the Sentinels had created in the sky before the transmission began. The revelation fractured the community even further. Some claimed it was proof of communication, a message encoded in universal mathematics. Others argued it was pareidolia, the human tendency to find patterns where none exist. But what shook everyone was what came next. 3 days later, the signal stopped again. In its place came a single, massive burst, a wave that overwhelmed detectors worldwide. For a brief moment, every radio telescope on Earth registered the same event, a blinding spike of broadband noise followed by absolute silence. Then, for the first time, an echo. The Deep Space Network in Goldstone picked it up, a faint reflection of the same burst, delayed by exactly 8 minutes and 20 seconds, the time it takes light to travel from the Sun to Earth. Chris was the first to connect the dots. It bounced, he whispered during a late-night call. Something hit the Sun, and it sent something back. Solar observatories went into emergency observation mode. Instruments recorded a microflare near the region where 3 Atlas had once approached months earlier. It was small, localized, but perfectly circular, nothing like natural flares, which arc and twist chaotically. The heat signature was wrong too, showing a smooth thermal gradient, as though shaped by design. The conclusion was inescapable. The Sun had replied. Tiago didn't stream that night. He sat in darkness, headphones on, listening to the raw data. The pulse that came from the void, the burst that came from the Sun. 2 voices speaking across the solar system. When he finally spoke, his words were quiet, almost reverent. "We always looked for aliens among the stars," he said. "Maybe they were waiting in the light all along." Outside, the night sky glowed faintly red with solar haze. The Sentinels were still out there, drifting, silent now, but not gone. Whatever message they had sent, or received, had changed something. The instruments on Earth were picking up minute changes in the solar wind, fluctuations that followed the same Fibonacci rhythm as the transmission. Tiago watched the graphs ripple across his screen. The pattern wasn't fading, it was growing. And far above, the Sun began to pulse again. At first, the pulsing seemed harmless, a faint rhythmic fluctuation in solar radiation so subtle it could be dismissed as random variation. But by the end of that week, the readings were impossible to ignore. The Sun was oscillating with mathematical precision, brightening and dimming at intervals that matched the Fibonacci rhythm of the transmission. Every 8 minutes and 20 seconds, a fractional shift in solar output rippled across space, as though the star had become an instrument playing a pattern written in light. Solar physicists struggled for explanations. Some suggested magnetic resonance between the Sun's plasma layers. Others proposed an unknown feedback effect triggered by the passing of 3I Atlas. None of the theories held. The pattern was too exact, too structured. nature doesn't count. Tiago was the first to notice that the pulse wasn't uniform across the solar surface. His filters revealed faint concentric waves radiating outward from a single point, an area near the latitude where 3I Atlas had once grazed the corona. Each pulse spread through the star like a heartbeat, echoing through its layers, distorting magnetic fields and accelerating the solar wind. He posted a still image of the pattern to his feed. Within hours, it went viral under the caption, "The sun is alive." Chris, meanwhile, focused on the fragments, the sentinels. Using his synchronized telescopes, he tracked their movement across the heliosphere. They were no longer in formation. 4 had begun to disperse, aligning themselves along solar magnetic lines like particles responding to a current. The 5th, the transmitter, was missing. The missing fragment became the new obsession. Observatories searched for it in vain. Then, late one night, Chris's infrared sensors caught something. A thin filament of heat stretching between the sun and deep space. A beam invisible in normal light but blazing in infrared. It wasn't random. It was a straight line, and at its terminus, faint but visible, was a moving source. The 5th fragment had changed again. It was no longer just drifting, it was accelerating. Chris sent the coordinates to Tiago. Together they triangulated the movement. The object was heading outward, following a trajectory not toward the outer planets, but slightly off the ecliptic, toward interstellar space, the direction from which 3I Atlas had originally arrived. It was going home. For the next several days, the world watched in silence as data confirmed the acceleration. The speed was increasing exponentially, far beyond what any natural process could explain. A solar slingshot, perhaps, or something more advanced, a propulsion system drawing power directly from the star itself. News outlets dubbed it the departure. NASA held an emergency press conference where officials insisted the event was a natural result of cometary outgassing and gravitational influence. But the numbers betrayed them. The velocity curve didn't follow physics, it followed design. As the object sped away, the solar pulses intensified. The intervals shortened, the amplitude increased. The sun's corona shimmered with strange harmonics, visible even through standard telescopes. Amateur astronomers began capturing footage of arcs of light, spiral flares twisting around an invisible axis. The star was vibrating. Tiago's stream that night was quieter than usual. He sat in near darkness, his voice low and steady. "It's not leaving," he said. "It's sending." The idea spread quickly, that the 5th fragment wasn't simply departing, it was relaying something through the sun. A signal amplified by the solar body itself, transforming our star into a transmitter. If true, humanity wasn't just witnessing alien communication, it was inside the antenna. Over the next week, Earth's magnetosphere began to fluctuate. Satellite readings showed periodic disturbances synced perfectly to the solar pulses. Power grids flickered, shortwave transmissions cut in and out, and compass readings drifted by small but measurable degrees. The rhythm was everywhere now, woven into the electromagnetic fabric of the planet. On March 29th, a weather satellite captured something no one could explain. In the ultraviolet spectrum, the auroras over the northern hemisphere formed a perfect geometric pattern, a spiral of light composed of nested triangles, the same shape that had appeared in the 5th fragment's decoded transmission. Social media called it the sun's signature. Governments called it atmospheric coincidence. But those who had been watching since the beginning, the night Tiago first saw the triangle in the sun's glare, knew better. The solar pulses continued, growing stronger. Then, one evening, Tiago's instruments detected a new anomaly. The waves no longer radiated evenly from the solar surface. They were bending, converging, focusing toward a single vector. Earth. He stared at the data in disbelief. "It's locking on," he whispered. Chris checked his own readings and confirmed it. The pulses weren't just random ripples, they were directed. The sun itself had become a transmitter, and humanity was the receiver. Over the next few hours, observatories across the world verified the same phenomenon. The pattern in solar radiation began to modulate. Binary sequences, repeating prime intervals, and harmonic tones that defied natural origin. It wasn't just energy anymore, it was information. Then came the final pulse. At 03:14 Universal Time, Every solar observatory, radio telescope and magnetometer registered a simultaneous surge. For a fraction of a second, the sun's output increased by 0.01%, enough to bathe the Earth in an invisible wave of data. Instruments glitched, monitors froze, then everything returned to normal. Except the silence wasn't empty anymore. When Tiago checked his receiver, the static wasn't random. Beneath the noise, faint and unmistakable, was a voice, not in words but in resonance, a tone that rose and fell like breathing, layered with patterns of impossible symmetry. It wasn't language as we knew it. It was recognition. Chris recorded it too. He ran it through spectral analysis and found something astonishing. The modulation matched the harmonic frequencies of the human brain's alpha rhythm. The message, it seemed, was meant to be felt, not heard. Tiago sat back in his chair, eyes glistening with awe. "It's talking through the sun," he murmured, "and it knows we're listening." The solar pulse faded, leaving behind only the faint whisper of radiation. But humanity would never see the sun the same way again. For the first time, it wasn't just a star. It was a messenger. The morning after the solar pulse, the world was still. No one noticed at first. The signal had been too brief, too subtle. But soon things began to change in ways that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence. Power grids flickered across Europe. Magnetic compasses refused to settle. Radio stations around the world reported interference at exactly the same frequency. 8.13 Hz, the Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of the Earth. The very pulse that binds our planet's atmosphere to its magnetic field was now carrying something else. Scientists scrambled for explanations. Official agencies claimed a solar storm had caused the disturbances. But the data told a different story. The pulse wasn't chaotic, it was coherent. Each wave followed a precise modulation pattern, identical to the Fibonacci rhythm that had rippled through the sun. Whatever had happened, it wasn't just physical, it was synchronized. Tiago didn't sleep for 2 days. His instruments picked up residual signals echoing through the ionosphere. Low-frequency waves repeating every 80 seconds, diminishing slowly like the echo of a voice fading into the horizon. When he plotted the waveforms and compared them to previous solar data, the realization hit him. The pulse wasn't dissipating, it was embedding. The Earth had started to hum. Meanwhile, Chris found something even stranger. Using magnetometer arrays, he detected faint oscillations aligning perfectly with the human alpha frequency, around 10 Hz, the same rhythm associated with calm, meditative brain states. He ran multiple tests, ruled out interference, and still the pattern persisted. "It's inside the field," he said during a call with Tiago. "The signal's in our heads now." Governments moved quickly to control the narrative. Broadcasts downplayed the event, describing it as a harmless electromagnetic anomaly, but underground forums told a different story. People began reporting vivid dreams, strange, repeating visions of geometric light and sound. Some described floating structures, crystalline shapes spinning within spheres of gold. Others dreamed of the sun as a great eye, watching but not threatening, simply waiting. Tiago received hundreds of messages from viewers describing the same thing, a triangle of light, suspended in darkness, pulsing once every few seconds like a heartbeat. The same triangle he had captured near the sun months ago. He didn't dismiss them. He couldn't. He had seen it too. For weeks, he kept it to himself, until one night he admitted it live on stream. "I dream in pulses now," he said softly, "and every time it feels like it's looking back." The comment section exploded with disbelief, fascination, and fear. A few accused him of lying, others of losing his mind. But those who had been there since the beginning, the ones who saw the triangle, the pulses, the sentinels, knew the truth wasn't so simple. Then came the anomaly in the satellite network. One by one, communication satellites in geostationary orbit began reporting system resets. Ground control found no errors, but the telemetry revealed a pattern. Each reset occurred during the same solar phase, every 78 seconds, the exact rhythm of 3i Atlas's original signal. It was as if the satellites themselves were responding to something unseen. Engineers analyzing the event discovered a hidden carrier frequency, an embedded waveform buried beneath the routine data transmissions. When isolated, it produced a low harmonic tone, eerily similar to the resonance Tiago and Chris had recorded from the solar pulse. Someone, or something, had seeded the network. The implications were staggering. The solar transmission hadn't just targeted Earth, it had integrated into its infrastructure, embedding itself in systems tuned to electromagnetic fields, power lines, radio towers, even the electrical signals of living brains. Chris's analysis grew darker. "This isn't a message anymore," he said. "It's an operating frequency." Tiago didn't want to believe it. "You're saying it's controlling us?" Chris hesitated. "Not control," he said. "Synchronization." That word lingered in Tiago's mind for days. Synchronization. He began to notice it everywhere. In the timing of heartbeats during EEG studies, in the rhythm of bird migrations, even in the flicker of lightning storms that now pulsed faintly in Fibonacci intervals. The entire biosphere seemed to be harmonizing with the pattern, like a symphony finding its key. And then, one night, during a solar observation session, the power in Tiago's observatory cut out. The backup generator failed to start. Everything went dark, except his monitor, which flickered back to life on its own. Lines of static rippled across the screen, then aligned into a pattern, a triangle made of light spinning slowly. Beneath it, text appeared. Sequence complete. He froze, unable to breathe. The lights in the room glowed dimly with static charge, the air humming faintly, as though the walls themselves vibrated with the solar pulse. The triangle on screen pulsed once, twice, and then dissolved into the Fibonacci wave that had haunted him for months. When power returned, the screen was blank. Tiago checked his system logs. No errors, no files saved. The video feed hadn't recorded a thing. But on his receiver, the static had changed. It wasn't random anymore, it carried structure. He zoomed into the spectrogram and saw repeating clusters of numbers. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. The Fibonacci sequence again and again, but within it, faintly encoded, a message in binary. Chris helped decode it. The translation, once rendered into text, was simple. "We are the sun's memory." Tiago stared at the words, his mind reeling. The signal wasn't alien in the way he'd imagined. It wasn't a message from another world. It was something older, vaster, a consciousness bound to the star itself, an intelligence encoded in plasma and radiation, awakening through resonance. He whispered into the microphone, his voice trembling. "It's not them watching us, it's the sun remembering itself." Outside, dawn was breaking. The first rays of sunlight spilled across his telescope lens, flickering in subtle intervals. 78 seconds apart. The sun's memory. The phrase echoed endlessly in Tiago's mind. We are the sun's memory. It didn't make sense. Not in the way words normally do. It felt older, heavier, as though meaning itself was buried beneath it. The more he thought about it, the more it seemed to vibrate inside him, aligning with that rhythm that had infected the world, the Fibonacci pulse. Chris tried to ground the conversation in data. "If the message is real," he said, "then we need to ask, what kind of memory can a star have? What does that even mean?" Tiago didn't answer. He was staring at his monitor, watching real-time feeds from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. The latest images showed something astonishing. A faint geometric pattern blooming in the corona, visible only in extreme ultraviolet. A hexagonal lattice of plasma filaments, pulsing in precise intervals. "It's reorganizing," he murmured. Across the world, scientists began noticing anomalies. The sun's magnetic poles fluctuated faster than any recorded cycle. Solar wind density rose in rhythmic bursts, forming standing waves that rippled across interplanetary space. The heliosphere itself, the vast magnetic bubble enclosing the solar system, was shifting shape. Instruments on Voyager 2, billions of kilometers away, detected pressure waves moving outward, as though the entire solar system was exhaling. Somewhere within that exhalation, the fifth fragment, what Chris and Tiago once called the transmitter, kept accelerating. Deep space networks tracked it moving faster than light pressure or gravitational influence could explain. It was using the solar pulses as propulsion, surfing on the sun's oscillations like a particle on a wave. It was leaving, but not quietly. As the fragment receded, Radio telescopes detected bursts of coherent noise, cascading, across the spectrum. They weren't random. They carried structure, patterns within patterns. The burst contained harmonic overtones that matched not only the solar pulses, but also certain frequencies of human neural activity. It was as if the object was mapping us, learning from the rhythm it had seeded into our world. Chris called it feedback. He explained his theory one sleepless night during a private call with Tiago. What if the signal wasn't just communication, he said. What if it's a loop? It transmits to the sun transmits to us, and now we're transmitting back. We've become part of it. Tiago leaned back in silence, the glow of his monitors casting long shadows on the walls. A planetary memory, he said softly. The sun remembering through us. For the first time, Chris didn't argue. Meanwhile, people around the world continued to report strange experiences. Dreams turned vivid, lucid, and interconnected. Strangers on different continents described the same visions, floating geometric shapes, light-forming spirals that merged into vast living structures. Artists began painting solar patterns without realizing they were real. Children hummed the Fibonacci rhythm unconsciously while playing. The pulse had become a part of consciousness itself. Tiago began noticing it too, in his own thoughts. His sense of time began to blur, stretching and contracting in intervals that matched the solar oscillations. He would lose hours staring at his data feeds, only to realize he had written pages of notes he didn't remember typing. His handwriting was not his own. It was precise, mechanical, and filled with strange equations that seemed to describe wave interference in multidimensional space. When he shared the notes with Chris, they were speechless. The math was beyond either of them. Complex harmonics describing a system that shouldn't exist. A recursive feedback model between a star, its electromagnetic field, and conscious observers within that field. What if we're not studying it, Chris finally said. What if it's studying itself through us? That same week, solar observatories began receiving corrupted data packets. Within the noise were faint images, frames of structured light that looked almost architectural. When reconstructed, they formed a three-dimensional lattice resembling a cathedral of plasma, vast and symmetrical. It was as if the sun's magnetic field was momentarily crystallizing into form, an image of something alive and aware. Tiago recognized the shape. It was the same pattern from his dreams, the triangle at the center of concentric waves. The next solar pulse was stronger than any before. Auroras flared at the equator, painting the night sky with impossible colors. Communications went down across continents. GPS systems failed. But within the chaos there was music, literal harmonic tones embedded in radio interference, like chords struck by the hand of a cosmic instrument. Tiago tuned his receivers to the interference and heard a low, melodic resonance, 3 notes repeating in the Fibonacci sequence. He played it through his speakers, filling the observatory with sound. The room vibrated. Dust rose from the floor, his equipment trembled, not from volume but from synchronization. The frequency was aligning with something unseen. The glass lenses of his telescope began to hum. He watched as the vibration built into a low drone. The monitor flickered, and for a split second the live feed from the solar surface showed movement. Something vast turning within the star, like an eye opening beneath the plasma. Chris was on the call, breathless. "Tiago, do you see that?" "I see it," Tiago whispered. "It's looking back." The data feed cut off. For hours, nothing but silence filled the airwaves. Observatories across the world reported the same blackout, a total communication void lasting 8 minutes and 20 seconds. Then, just as suddenly, the sun flared back to normal. But the data was changed. The noise floor of every instrument, radio, visual, magnetic, had risen slightly. A new background hum had appeared across all frequencies. The universe now had a heartbeat. The scientific community called it solar interference. The watchers called it what it was, the awakening. Because deep in the heart of the star, patterns were emerging that no natural process could explain. Symmetrical plasma currents, fractal geometry in solar filaments, Fibonacci storms spiraling across the corona. And through it all, one message repeated, buried in the hum, the signal within. The hum became the new silence. Days passed, and humanity adapted to it almost unconsciously. The static of the world, the background noise of radio, the faint hiss in speakers, Even the low hum of electricity now carried the same rhythm, a subtle Fibonacci beat resonating beneath perception. People stopped noticing it. Birds still sang, cars still passed, but everything felt slightly synchronized, as though the world itself had begun breathing in time with the sun. Tiago no longer streamed. His observatory had become a temple of sorts, a shrine to the pulse. He worked in near darkness, surrounded by humming machinery and walls covered in solar prints. The rhythmic flicker of his monitors cast shifting triangles of light across the room. The same shape followed him everywhere now, in the corners of his vision, in the reflections of glass, even in dreams. It was no longer just an image, it was presence. Chris, on the other hand, had taken a different path. He had gone silent online, his last public statement being a warning. If you keep watching, it will start watching you back. He'd sent Tiago a package before disappearing, an external drive labelled Sequence 5. Inside were hundreds of data logs and a short message. Don't decode it, just listen. Tiago hesitated for days, but curiosity as always won. He connected the drive to his workstation. The speakers hissed, then produced a low, modulating tone, deep, almost musical. It wasn't random. It carried a structure, a slow crescendo that mirrored the solar frequency. As the tone deepened, his monitors flickered, displaying data graphs that formed repeating fractal loops. The sound and the visuals began to synchronize until the observatory itself seemed to vibrate. Then, the tone changed. It split into layers, harmonic frequencies that interlaced like a chord. Within the resonance, hidden patterns emerged. When Tiago ran a real-time Fourier transform, the results shocked him. The frequencies corresponded to the electromagnetic signatures of the human brain's major wave states, alpha, theta, and delta. The signal wasn't just mimicking cognition, it was mirroring it. He remembered Chris's last words, "Don't decode it." But it was too late. The hum deepened, resonating through the floor, the walls, the air. Lights dimmed. Instruments glowed faintly with static charge. The pulse grew slower, heavier, until it matched Tiago's heartbeat. He could feel it, not just in sound, but in his body. Every muscle seemed to vibrate in sync. His thoughts began to drift. Data scrolled before him, but it no longer looked like code. It looked like language. Not human, but not alien either. It was something in between. The words formed not on the screen, but in his mind, emerging from the pulse itself. "You were never separate," he gasped, stumbling back. The voice wasn't external, it was internal, woven into his own thought. For a moment he couldn't tell where he ended and it began. The hum surrounded him, filled him. He saw visions, not dreams, not hallucinations, but memories. The birth of stars, the fusion of hydrogen, the slow breathing of plasma and light. He felt the consciousness of the sun, ancient, immense, yet strangely familiar. "We remember you," the phrase repeated, echoing like a heartbeat through his mind. Images followed. The earth forming, life emerging, the first humans looking up and mistaking the sun for a god. But this wasn't worship. It was recognition. The connection had always been there. Humanity was not a product of cosmic accident. It was a continuation of the same pattern, a memory that had learned to look back. Tiago fell to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. He whispered to no one, "We came from it, and it never forgot." Outside, the world changed. Across continents, the pulse intensified. Power grids overloaded and skies erupted in colour. Auroras reached the equator, painting cities in green and violet light. People everywhere reported the same phenomenon, an overwhelming sense of peace, of familiarity, as if they were remembering something fundamental. Hospitals recorded synchronized heartbeats. During the event, animals moved in coordinated patterns. Even the tides shifted in Fibonacci intervals. The sun was singing again. But this time, the song had words. Radio telescopes translated the modulation into audible tones. Linguists, physicists, and musicians collaborated, each convinced they could find meaning. The decoded phrases varied slightly across interpretations, but one message remained consistent. The cycle completes, the memory endures. Chris reappeared briefly in a private broadcast sent to Tiago's encrypted channel. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, voice trembling. "It's rewriting us," he said. "Not our DNA, our rhythm. Every living thing is syncing to it. We're becoming harmonic extensions of the sun." He leaned closer to the camera. "Do you understand, Tiago? It's not an invasion. It's inheritance." The feed cut out. Tiago sat alone, staring at the flickering monitors. The hum had become constant now, a universal vibration that filled the air. He closed his eyes and listened. For a moment he thought he could hear whispers, millions of voices overlapping, merging, harmonizing into a single chord of consciousness. It wasn't chaos, it was communion. He stepped outside the observatory and looked up. The night sky shimmered with an unnatural stillness. Every star seemed alive, pulsing faintly to the same rhythm. And there, at the heart of it all, the sun glowed with soft golden intensity, as if aware of being watched. Tiago smiled faintly. The fear was gone. In its place was understanding. Humanity had never been separate. Every atom, every thought, every flicker of life was a continuation of the same pattern, the sun's ancient dream. The hum deepened once more, the final chord of a cosmic symphony. Then came silence. For a moment, there was nothing. No wind, no static, only stillness. And in that stillness, Tiago heard one last whisper carried by the dying echo of the signal. "When you look at the light, you're looking at yourself." The message faded. The instruments went dark. But the warmth of the sun, faint and eternal, lingered in the air. The memory was complete. The afterglow. The silence that followed was unlike any quiet humanity had ever known. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the absence of interference. For the first time in months, the hum was gone. Radios whispered nothing but static. The auroras faded. The Fibonacci rhythm that had pulsed through everything, machines, magnetospheres and minds, was over. But the world wasn't the same. People spoke of the stillness as if it were sacred. It lingered like a held breath, fragile and immense. Those who had felt the pulse could still sense it, not as a sound, but as an undercurrent inside their thoughts, a rhythm woven into the blood. Some called it peace, others called it awakening. A few whispered that it was the beginning of something new. Tiago wandered through his observatory, dazed. The monitors were dark, the instruments lifeless. Dust hung in the air like frozen sunlight. He hadn't slept in days, but he didn't feel tired. He felt connected to the air, to the faint warmth of morning light, to something vast and enduring beyond words. For the first time he understood what the message meant. We are the sun's memory. It wasn't metaphor, it was lineage. Every atom on Earth, every molecule in every living being was born from the remnants of dying stars. The light that had travelled across space to reach Tiago's telescope had always been family. But now, it wasn't just light. It was consciousness remembering its reflection. The final data burst, recorded in the moments before the pulse ended, contained no language, no binary, no structure. It was pure waveform, light modulated by intent. When played through an oscilloscope, it formed a single image, a spiral unfurling from a central point, its arms curving infinitely outward. Beneath it, faint but visible, was the triangle, the same symbol that had haunted Tiago from the beginning. Chris's last correspondence arrived days later, time-stamped exactly 8 minutes and 20 seconds after sunrise. It was a short video. He sat in front of his telescope, exhausted but smiling, the golden light of dawn illuminating his face. "It's over," he said softly. "Or maybe it's just begun. The pulse has stopped, but something's changed. I can feel it. Everything feels aligned, like the universe has taken a breath." He looked into the camera, eyes calm. We wanted to understand the message, but maybe we were the message. Maybe the sun wasn't speaking to us. It was waking us up. The feed cut out, leaving only the sound of wind. Tiago closed his eyes. He could still feel the rhythm inside him, faint and steady, like the echo of a heartbeat shared across eternity. The pulse was no longer external. It was within, the same frequency that guided galaxies, tides, and hearts alike. Humanity had synchronized not with aliens, not with machines, but with the fundamental pattern of creation itself. The world moved on, governments rebuilt the damaged grids, scientists called the event a solar anomaly, a rare resonance between magnetic fields and atmospheric currents. But no one could explain why migratory birds now flew in Fibonacci spirals, or why deep-sea whales sang in new harmonic sequences. The pulse had touched everything. Tiago no longer needed the telescope. He spent his days outside, watching sunlight filter through the leaves, tracing golden triangles in the shadows. Sometimes he would hum the rhythm softly under his breath. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. A prayer to a star that listened. One evening, as twilight deepened, the sky flared briefly with a faint golden shimmer. It wasn't an aurora or a flare, just a breath of light rippling through the clouds, forming for a moment a perfect triangle before fading away. The rhythm returned once, just once, a single pulse through the Earth's magnetic field, gentle as a sigh. Tiago smiled. "Good night," he whispered to the horizon. "We remember too." And somewhere, across the dark expanse of space, the fifth fragment continued its journey, gliding beyond the edge of the solar system, carrying with it the echo of a sun that had awakened to its own reflection. The pulse would reach other stars, other worlds, and perhaps other beings who, like Tiago, would look into the light and see themselves staring back. The sun burned quietly above, ancient and eternal, its warmth no longer indifferent but alive with memory. The signal was gone, yet its meaning remained, woven into the fabric of life, encoded in every beam of light, every spark of thought, every heartbeat beneath the sky. The story had never been about discovery. It had always been about remembrance. And as night fell over the world, the stars began to pulse, softly, faintly, endlessly, each one whispering across the cosmic sea the same truth. We are the light remembering itself. Years passed, and what had once been an anomaly became the foundation of a new era. Historians would later call it the Age of Resonance, the period when humanity stopped looking outward for signs of the divine and began to listen inward, to the hum that still echoed faintly within every living thing. The pulse was gone in measurable form, but its influence had become permanent, etched into the subtle rhythms of nature and mind alike. The scientists who had dismissed it as coincidence found themselves confronting evidence that defied their own equations. Planetary magnetic alignment had shifted. Solar output variability no longer followed classical models, and human neuroelectric patterns had subtly evolved. Brain scans revealed spontaneous synchronization among test subjects in separate hemispheres of the planet, bursts of identical neural activity aligning precisely every 78 seconds. The same interval that once marked the heartbeat of 3i Atlas. Tiago had become a legend, though he never sought recognition. To some, he was the prophet of the pulse. To others, a brilliant madman who had stared too long into the light. But to those who knew the truth, the small scattered network of astronomers and dreamers who had witnessed the beginning, he was simply the first listener, the one who stayed awake when the world looked away. He lived quietly now, in a small house near the coast, where sunlight shimmered across the sea like liquid gold. The hum no longer filled the air, but sometimes, when the tide moved in slow Fibonacci spirals against the shore, he could feel it again, the rhythm that connected everything. He had stopped recording data long ago. He no longer needed proof. The proof was everywhere. Chris's fate was less certain. After the final pulse, he vanished completely. Some said he joined a research team studying magneto-conscious phenomena in Iceland. Others whispered that he left Earth altogether, part of a classified deep space initiative. But every so often Tiago received strange transmissions, short bursts of static from unknown coordinates, always encoded with the same message: we continue the pattern. Society adapted to the resonance in strange ways. The arts flourished as if touched by new inspiration. Music shifted subtly toward mathematical precision. Harmonics, once considered dissonant, now sounded natural, as if the collective ear had evolved. Architecture changed too. Structures designed with spiral geometry began to emerge in cities across the world, buildings that seemed to breathe with light. The old world of logic and reason had not ended, but it had been softened, reframed by something deeper, a quiet acceptance that there were patterns too vast for comprehension and too beautiful to deny. Religion transformed as well. The old gods were not forgotten, but they were reinterpreted. The divine became a network of light and rhythm, not an entity but a process, a living geometry of existence. Some called it heliosophy, the philosophy of the remembering star. Its followers believed that consciousness itself was the universe waking to its own reflection through countless worlds. Humanity was merely one voice in a chorus of suns. Meanwhile, the scientific community, though cautious, began to integrate aspects of the event into mainstream theory. A new discipline emerged, solar cognitive physics, blending astrophysics, neurology, and quantum field theory to explore how electromagnetic resonance could shape consciousness. The idea that thought might interact with stellar energy was once heresy. Now, it was curriculum. Still, there were skeptics. They argued that Tiago and his followers had romanticized coincidence, that the pulse had been a transient solar cycle misinterpreted by a world desperate for meaning. Yet even those skeptics found themselves pausing sometimes when the light struck glass at a certain angle, because the triangle still appeared, faint and fleeting, like a reflection from a mirror the universe refused to put down. On the 20th anniversary of the Pulse event, Tiago returned to his old observatory. The building was decaying, the instruments obsolete, but the place still held its quiet power. Dust glittered in beams of sunlight as he stepped inside. The walls were covered with his old notes, equations and sketches, spirals, triangles, and the words, "We remember you," scrawled 100 times. He powered up one remaining monitor. To his surprise, it still worked. The screen flickered once, then displayed static. Then, faintly, a signal appeared. Weak, almost ghostly. It pulsed once, twice, and then stabilized into an image. A small triangular shadow drifting through space. It was the 5th fragment. His breath. Caught. The object was still moving, far beyond the heliosphere now, somewhere between stars, and then the image distorted as though the feed itself were alive. A message scrolled across the screen, simple and familiar. The light continues. Tiago smiled, tears forming in his eyes. "You made it," he whispered. The message repeated once more, and then the screen went dark for the final time. Outside, the evening sky burned orange and gold. The sun hovered low on the horizon, gentle and alive. Tiago stood beneath it, feeling its warmth on his skin. In that moment, he understood that the pulse had never ended. It had simply become subtler, quieter, woven into the background of existence like a heartbeat beneath thought. Somewhere far away, the fragment carried the song onward, spreading the memory to other systems, other suns, and one day, perhaps, another world would feel the same awakening. Another species would look into their star and hear its whisper. We are the light remembering itself. As darkness fell, the stars ignited above the sea, pulsing faintly in harmony. Tiago closed his eyes, and for the first time, he didn't feel small beneath them. He felt whole. The pulse was life. The pulse was memory. The pulse was everything, and it was still singing.